And that was our final comment.
Thank you very much. We will move on. And thank you for those that provided general comment. We do have no public hearings today, so we're moving on to item C1. And it is the approval of minutes. We would like to approve the minutes of Tuesday, December 8th, 2020. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay. Motion by Board Member Fowler, seconded by Board Member Mano. Board Member
Dugan.
Rogers.
I think the second was by Board Member Dugan.
Oh, sorry, but Board Member Dugan. I'm going to roll call it. Board Member Rogers.
Yes.
Board Member Ferris.
Yes.
Wharton. Sure, he's here. Dugan.
Yes.
Mano.
Yes.
Fowler.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So that passes. Item number 2, it's a motion meeting remotely with our anchor location. And we are considering a motion to ratify the chair's determination to continue meeting remotely and without an anchor location due to the health and safety of the people who may be in attendance, and considering the continued closure of the city and county building to the public.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Board Member Fowler and a second by Dugan. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to roll call this. Rogers,
Yes.
Ferris,
Yes.
Wharton is absent. So Mano,
Yes.
Dugan,
Yes.
Fowler.
Yes.
All right. That passes. We're moving on to item number 3, and we have an informational follow-up about the Station Center Innovation District concept. And at the table, we have Ben Lutke from our office, Danny Walls, RDA, Ashley Ogden, RDA, Cara Linsley, RDA, and Tammy Hansaker, RDA. We also have University of Utah representatives, Jonathan Bates and Jennifer McGrath at the table, if we have additional questions. So go ahead, Ben or Danny.
Thank you, Chairperson. As you mentioned, this is the second briefing on Station Center Innovation District concept and the predisposition report for potentially selling over 10 acres of RDA-owned property to the University of Utah. A quick reminder, page 5 of the transmittal has a map of Station Center showing the ownership by parcels if you want to reference that during the discussion. Also, this morning, an email was sent to you at 9:33 listing the questions that staff heard from you at the last briefing. And these questions were passed on to RDA staff. Now, time ran short at the last briefing, so we know some of you had additional questions you wanted to ask, as well as policy considerations to share, which is why we have a follow-up briefing today. Since then, RDA staff have gathered responses to some of those questions, recognizing that some responses are yet to be determined because negotiations and discussions with the University of Utah are ongoing. So with that short intro, I'll turn the time over to RDA staff, and the presentation they have for you is up on the screen.
Great. Ben, thank you very much. Madam Chair, thank you. Members of the board, thank you. We appreciate being here. We appreciate the board continuing this discussion from our last presentation. Just to elaborate on what Ben has already set the stage for, we as staff have taken notes on that discussion, as well as we've received the questions that he referred to from council staff. Before I turn over to Ashley and Kara, I just want to simply reiterate what Ben said, that we are still in the very early stages of this project, still negotiating with the University of Utah As such, as you indicate, we're not prepared to answer many of the specific questions that you've been provided from council staff, specifically regarding the governance or the programming of the district. However, we are continuing to have those conversations with the board. And just as we are here updating you, the university staff is working with their stakeholders and continuing to update their board in order to get answers and address those questions. So we wanted to just set that stage as we go into this conversation. We do have some follow-up info on some of the items that Ashley and Kara can speak to and we can go through, but there is a lot that is still to be determined. And our primary goal here today is just to kind of sit here and listen and continue to track the questions, the policy concerns, and the discussion of the board. So having said that, Ashley and Kara, I think you both have made it back into the meeting, so I'll turn it over to you for a presentation.
Yeah, sorry, Taylor, is it possible for me to share my screen instead? Or would that take too long?
Yeah, sure. Let me give that to you.
Thank you. My share button is blacked out. Okay, thank you. Okay. Can everyone see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so the first question that we felt like we could respond to was related to a concern that the district needs more than a single anchor tenant with some longer term RDA control and involvement in order to create a diverse built environment that all people want to visit. So in addition to making Station Center a model of transit-oriented development for the state, the RDA feels very passionate about making sure that the result is a unique, identifiable neighborhood with a mix of land uses that have peak hours scattered throughout the day to ensure near constant activation of the district. We definitely understand the concern that working with one landowner or anchor could result in a large land development, but we do anticipate that the project will be offered and built in phases by different development teams, which will essentially have the same effect as the RDA releasing separate RFPs for different sites, with the RFPs being used to influence what is ultimately built. In addition, the RDA feels confident in the placemaking efforts that we've made, which we've covered before, so I'll keep it brief. But these include relying on the Station Center design guidelines that we've developed to influence the design of the project. We also support the adaptive reuse of historic wear structures that still exist within the district. We've also planned for the really unique streetscape infrastructure and community space improvements, which will turn 3rd South into a festival street that can be closed and used for events. On the same topic, even before the U was involved in this project, the RDA realized there were advantages to working with one entity to develop the district. For example, constructing new streets and upgrading utilities across multiple sites isn't a small task and will require a lot of planning and coordination. So under our current scenario, we'll be able to work with the U to come up with an overall phasing plan that will allow the district to be built out in a timely and orderly manner. And also something else especially important for this type of project is the fact that the neighborhood could be planned, governed, programmed, and branded as one comprehensive district. So I'm ready to move on to the next question, but feel free to stop me if you want to discuss that one, or let me know if it's okay to move on.
Board members, if you would like to, I mean, if you have a burning question right now, please speak up. If not, we'll have her go on with her presentation and have those questions later. Yep. Let me see you. I cannot see you. I don't see anybody saying anything else. So go ahead and keep going, Ashley. Thank you.
Okay, sure. So the next question asks, do the innovation district examples from the presentation have a single anchor tenant or multiple? And also, did those districts do long-term ground leases? So we did do some additional research into the projects that we mentioned last time. That included Research Triangle Park, the Cortex Innovation Community, and the Phoenix Core Project. I'd be happy to share more details with you, but in the interest of time, we compiled some key takeaways from those case studies. So first, innovation districts are often initiated through partnerships between many players. There are often multiple bid anchors involved. However, we want to keep in mind that we're working with about 12 acres here. Research Triangle Park includes 7,000 acres. Cortex includes 200 acres. So they simply have more land area available for more end users. But if we consider this within the context of the larger tech corridor initiative, beyond just Station Center, there's still an opportunity for other universities or institutions to co-locate within this area. We found that districts are commonly managed by fully staffed nonprofit entities who handle master planning of the area. They regulate development through things like protective covenants and other development agreements, and they implement that comprehensive branded programming. In 2 of the 3 examples, the managing nonprofit sells property for development by others. In contrast, the Phoenix project is largely owned by the city of Phoenix. The land is largely owned by them, and the city ground leases property to other entities for development. But we think it's important to note that without the managing nonprofit, it's then the city's responsibility to manage and program the campus. And last, some districts are located within special tax assessment areas. The Phoenix project is not located within a special area, so the city has upgraded infrastructure and made other public improvements through their capital improvement program. And the only development incentive that we could find online was that the city provides grants for the adaptive reuse of historic warehouses. So now I'll hand it off to Kara to cover the rest of the slides.
Thanks, Ashley. So we wanted to relate that information about other districts back to our proposed disposition strategy. We did explore several different real estate structures that could be used in Station Center and ultimately landed on the proposal to sell the RDA's property to the university for several reasons. The first is that a fee title sale could allow us to use the land value to construct the infrastructure improvements that are planned for the district. It could also allow us to use the land sale proceeds to implement other RDA priorities across other project areas, including North Temple and 9 Line, which are the RDA's West Side project areas. And then finally, this structure would position the University of Utah Research Foundation to act as that managing nonprofit entity for the district that we've seen in other districts. And the Research Foundation is set up to administer research parks, so they have the infrastructure and the staff expertise that's required to carry out that kind of initiative. The next question we wanted to address that was provided to us is, what are the options to do conditions, restrictions, or development agreements on the sale to advance the city's goals? So we do intend to use the type of agreements you suggested to ensure ongoing city or RDA involvement and a high level of public benefits. But we're still working with the university at this point to figure out what that will look like, the structure and what the agreements will look like. The next question was, how will maintenance of the public infrastructure be funded and managed? And are enhanced maintenance services expected or planned more than city's basic maintenance? So we know that we will be most successful here if we use a district-wide maintenance approach. And we're working with the university to determine that structure. Basic city maintenance would be enough for the streets like the new Pierpont Avenue and Market Street. But the plans for Station Center for sidewalk and plaza areas do include non-standard improvements that will require project-specific strategy for maintenance. We anticipate that maintenance will be funded either through special assessments that we've talked with the board about in the past, or through the district's management budget. And then finally, you asked, what niche does this innovation district fill that isn't covered by Research Park or the private market? And how would the district complement Research Park instead of competing with it? So we wanted to hand this question over to the university to respond to, as I'm sure they've put a lot of thought into this aspect of the project. And I believe both Jonathan Bates and Jennifer McGrath have been assigned as panelists. So I don't know which one wants to take that question.
Kara, I'll go ahead and lead out on this. This is Jonathan Bates, Executive Director of Real Estate Administration and Research Park for the University of Utah. I appreciate the time of the council and the mayor and the RDA staff on this conversation. The university and our research foundation is extremely excited about this opportunity, and we look forward to the continuing dialogue. We definitely feel that there is additional demand for the niche market that Research Park today sees as a foundation, which is the life sciences and the health sciences. But we recently commissioned a feasibility study with HRNA in partnership with the RDA and explored asset targets around innovation that would be specifically useful in the Station Center area. Those included areas such as biotech research, healthcare, tech and entrepreneurship, food security, nutrition, health equity, and education. And while we're not able to get into specific programming that the university will bring to bear in this area, that is a pretty robust portfolio to pull from. And we're excited to continue to plan around those strategies, the land uses, and the programming that will leverage Station Center to be a beautiful place for our city and for our region.
Thanks, Jonathan. So board members, do you have additional questions? Are you ready for discussion? Or maybe I wanted to ask staff, I know it said informational here, but are you looking for more direction from us? Or it's just discussion at this point about what's being presented?
It's our understanding that this is a purpose for the board to continue their discussion and provide any questions or policy concerns to us as we continue to work with the U and negotiate. So there's no action needed today other than just provide guidance.
All right.
Just,
Okay.
Madam Chair, just to jump in and clarify, the reason is that property disposition and acquisition is an administrative function. And so unless there's a request for a discount on the land value, then that's it falls within the administration's role.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jennifer, for that clarification. And I will reiterate that if the mayor would like to dispose of this property at fair market value, she can. And that's a function of the executive director in this case. If she would like to dispose of this land in a way that for an exchange of something, and so basically a discount, we the board need to discuss that. I hope that's clear. So have that in mind. And then if you have other questions, or if we want to start discussion, does anybody have a burning desire to talk about this? Go ahead, Darren.
Thanks. Do we know which is the case for this? Has that been determined whether it will be sold at fair market value or if it will be sold at some kind of discount? Or is that still yet to be decided?
Danny?
Kara or Ashley can jump in. Our conversations right now is that the price would obviously be hopefully fair market value. We are negotiating that with the U right now. But to Kara and Ashley's earlier comment, it has always been anticipated that a significant amount of the land proceeds that the agency would realize would be needed in order to build out the infrastructure that we have always anticipated building out as part of this project. So to that extent, to I think answer the question you're probably getting at, Councilmember Romano, is that part would come back to the board as part of a land discount that would need to be approved.
I'm sorry.
I should say not a land discount as much as a allocation of the sales proceeds. Sorry, I knew as soon as Ashley started shaking her head, I got that wrong.
So there would be no land discount. The disposition would happen under the executive director's authority at fair market value, but the use of those funds would then be a board decision.
Yes.
Correct.
I see.
That's a budget decision.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Sorry for the confusion on that.
Yeah, I was following you until that last part, and then I was very confused, but thanks.
Any other comments, Darren, on that? Did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the same question, but I guess I'll just reiterate my concern, which remains unchanged. I think that disposing of this large amount, almost 2 full city blocks of RDA-owned property to a single developer, as great of a partner as I believe the University of Utah to be, my concern is that two concerns. One is an equity concern of we're just really only at that point allowing really large companies, construction companies, architects, engineers, all of the above to participate because the project scale is so large. So an equity concern of, are we empowering small local businesses, or are we really sending these projects only out to large out-of-state firms, or only the few very large in-state firms that we have, or construction companies? And then also, anytime 2 city blocks is designed by one single team and built, it turns into a monotonous urban fabric. And I'm thinking a bit like City Creek or the Gateway, where my concern would be if all the buildings kind of match each other, then it sort of doesn't lead to the kind of vibrant, organic community that I would hope Station Center will become. And I say that all understanding that it's not necessarily me that gets to design and choose what Station Center would become, but my hope would be that it's something a little more vibrant. So I think those concerns, thank you for addressing them, Ashley, today. I think those concerns remain unchanged for me.
Thanks, Board Member Mano. Anybody else? I cannot see you guys. Hold on. Anybody have their hands up? One more time. Okay, go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, I just I wanted to ask a clarifying question, if I may. How long have we been with this property and waiting to develop it or get some sort of action going on there, Danny?
I was actually going to jump over to Kara for that one. She has a better timeline of the history, if that's all right.
Thanks, Kara. Hi, good to see you.
Hi. It's a good question. I think we started acquiring property in this area in the early 2000s up until 2011 or so. We've been working with a consultant to do the site planning and the infrastructure planning for probably about 5 years. I think there were a couple years where funding was reappropriated to affordable housing, and so getting that funding back in place for infrastructure is what was required for us to keep moving forward, and that started again in about 2019.
I remember when I first came on the council, this was one of the first things that we funded, was getting back to the infrastructure. So for 20 years, we've been acquiring the land in efforts to try to do something over there. And this is the project, forgive me if I'm wrong, but this is the project that the UDA consultants helped us on, correct? I get Station Center and Center Station, or whatever the two are called, mixed up. So
yeah, I have no idea why you would get those mixed up, but UDA helped us with the station area plan for Central Station, which included UTA property. So this is Station Center, yeah.
Great.
So 20 years acquiring land, and at least the last 10 years just trying to figure out what the best use of the land is and get something going there. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Fowler. Anybody else? James?
Chair, yeah, I'm not, I don't, it's more of a comment. I'm just excited to continue down this process and talk policy. And, I think I made my statements last time that I'm in favor of moving forward this. We actually, before I think everybody was on as a board member here, we looked at going single property, single parcels, and it didn't work out very well. The individual started and couldn't finish, and we pivoted completely because that is not going to work with the type of infrastructure needed to actually spark this development. So we actually need the proceeds in order to carry this infrastructure forward so we can create an environment. And I think there can be a lot to be said with that, Board Member Mono, using your expertise and making sure that this is something that you would like to see move forward with the fabric that you're discussing. It doesn't have to be that route. And what's really interesting is that you are one of the teachers up there at the architecture school that would make for a great opportunity to get kids involved that are studying architecture to make this something that would be unique for the entire area. So I'm interested in hearing the U of U's response to a lot of these policy questions that still aren't answered for us to move forward. But for me, I'm all in on this. This is a great project. Not only I feel like we're killing two birds with one stone, getting the infrastructure taken care of, as well as doing a catalytic project or a catalyst towards the other RDA project areas on the west side, whether it's the 9 Line or North Temple. So there's a lot to be said with 20 years of trying and trying and trying, and here we are having a willing partner to actually make it happen.
Madam Chair, may I?
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to echo James's or Board Member Rogers's thoughts here, and that, I think that, and I actually had this discussion with Mayor Mendenhall just the other day, that for a long time, it seems like the default was to sell our land. And I think that our council, when I first came on the council, it was a discussion of leasing it and doing those things. But when it's right, maybe it's the right thing to sell it, and that really evaluating when it's right and when it's not. And instead of making it a default, making it a question of looking at when we have the partners that are willing to buy it or willing, and it makes sense in a lot of different ways that, I don't want the pendulum to swing so far to the other side that we're not evaluating properties on a case by case basis and saying what really is right for the city. And so, and I think that we've done that here. I really do. I think that the analysis has been done. We have to James's point, we have a great willing partner, and we've been sitting on land for 20 years that we're still need something to be done, right? And we want something there to be done. And I think that we have an opportunity to work with somebody that's willing to look at this and say, what can we do? And if we're looking at some equitable issues, I think bringing access to, I'm going to say it because I'm a U alum, to the best university in the state, to people closer to some of our west side area. We can argue about what side is the west side and what side's the east side, but this is certainly closer than up on the hill. And we're bringing access to people there. And I think that we have a real opportunity to do something cool here. And I look forward, there certainly are policy discussions we can have, but one of the things that we all hear about in the city is how slow we are. Oh, we keep proving it. And I hope that we can move forward.
Thanks, Amy. Anybody else? I don't see. I agree with what's being said in general. I think we have this great opportunity with this great partner. And the way I see it is that because what they said, they want a stronger presence, if you will, or a more geographic presence within our city, in a stronger partnership with our city, obviously with our state. And they are an asset to Salt Lake City and to the state. We have this amazing asset that wants to expand and provide different opportunities for life sciences and health sciences, and they're willing to do more for equity and more to help lower income populations and see how we can integrate everything. So I see this as an amazing star opportunity. Somebody is willing and wants to stay and expand and be partners with us. And then here, but what they don't have is the land. And that's also our asset. That's our biggest asset as they see us, right? They would like this piece of land that they don't own at this point. But I think, regardless of that, I think a partnership could still happen, and perhaps not necessarily having to dispose of our land. And again, this is an executive director decision. If that's for fair market value, that can happen. I completely understand. But I think there should be a way for these assets to benefit both parties. And when I say both parties, I say the institution and also the taxpayers. With the land that we have right now, and hopefully we can guard it in perpetuity as land becomes more valuable and less and finite, obviously, and some funds that we won't be able to come up with in the future to acquire more land in this very valuable parts of our city. And so I love this idea of Station Center. I'm just a little bit caught up on the disposition part of it, but I think it can work either way. Thank you. Go ahead, Chris.
Is there, I know that you has had several like think tanks and or no, not think tanks, like incubators for small businesses and things like that. Will, maybe this is like, this discussion's too far down the road, but is there a way to address what Councilmember Mono is saying about supporting small businesses or having a portion of this area benefit small businesses or incubate small businesses and still have the benefits of a larger institutional partner? And is that a discussion that we can talk about going forward, or is there already plans for that in what the university's vision is?
Madam Chair, if possible, I'd love to respond to that as well as to a couple of the points that Councilman Mano brought up.
Go ahead, Jonathan. Thank you.
So, Councilman Wharton, that's an excellent point and something I didn't elaborate on well in my answer earlier, but we absolutely see Station Center as a focal point for startups, spinoffs, and company creation coming out of the institution. Being up on the hill, the ability of those startup companies to grow is problematic. We still feel that our existing research park is the ideal place for early stage companies, but we feel that creating an opportunity for those companies to evolve and grow in space closer to the CBD, as well as to the Northwest Quadrant, will strengthen our position in one, supporting startups, but also attracting other startups to our region from outside of the state. So we're absolutely focused on creating affordable, equitable access to smaller type firms in Station Center. We're not looking to anchor Station Center with a large corporate headquarters. We're also not looking to master develop Station Center with one development partner. We definitely want to take a phased approach to this. Activation, mixed use, programming are critical components to this process for the success of this innovation district. The university is a long-term owner. We're a long-term partner. With this acquisition, we're not going to lease it up, build it up, flip it, and leave. We're investing in something that's more about social impact and raising up the city and ensuring that our presence and our accessibility is extended out west. So hopefully that provides a little more context about the focus points of our development. Again, a lot of this is yet to be solidified, but those high-level concepts are very strongly supported from our side.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Madam
go ahead.
Chair,
Yes.
you know, one thing I failed to mention is that the life science spaces are really almost maxed out. I've got people coming to me all the time asking me, well, when are you going to build a building? When are you going to do this? Well, we've got, I don't want to say a competitor, but we do. We've got the Silicon Slopes and we've got Lehigh. We've got all those areas where they're building sole buildings, standalone buildings for whatever is coming their way. And I'm afraid that if we don't take action or support the action that is necessary on this, it's just going to pass us by. And this next hub is going to be somewhere else outside of Salt Lake City. So I don't think that you're going to have developers coming and knocking on the door to tell you that, but that is what is being spoken of out there currently in the market. I have people approaching me all the time. We have a vacant parking lot. You know, I've expressed that to you. You and I have spoken offline about that. But you know, they're trying to gobble up anything and anything and everything that they possibly can in order to fulfill the needs that are currently out there with life sciences. We know Boston, we know San Diego, we know all these other areas are just popping off with life science and the biotech industry, and we are going to miss that opportunity and get bypassed by Silicon Slopes or by the Lehigh area if we don't act.
I don't disagree with you, James, but you know, yes, I talked to one of the regions the other day of you know, and a developer here in Salt Lake City about Silicon Slopes and how, you know, how they literally, you know, they're, I guess what I'm trying to say is we're really not competing with them in a way. They are where they are and they will stay. We need to provide those space for the life sciences, health sciences, and the innovation of this, you know, that might not necessarily just be Silicon Slopes, but other type of workforce that they don't have. And that's, I think, as I understood my meeting with the U, was that that's what they're trying to capture because of what you just said. There's a lot of need, and they, with that need and the U be wanting to be more present in our city, then Station Center will be the perfect space for them, as you said. And I completely agree, and I think it's a great opportunity. I think and because it's a great opportunity, because we have entrepreneurs here like and people like Clark, you know, this great champion of seeing what it could be, you know, what more it could be, and the opportunities that we have. And you know, we can dream, and sky's the limit. And I think there's a way to make this deal work, and I hope it happens. I just want to make sure that we also keep in mind, you know, at least in my mind, the land disposition is where I'm always caught up.
Oh,
But I think we can do amazing
I
things.
totally get
We can
you,
do amazing
Madam Chair.
things.
I'm on board with you 100%. And these are, I'm not speaking with nonprofits. I'm talking for-profit developers that are looking at this. So if you want to, I'd be more than willing. I've had 3 come to me in the past month to discuss it. So if you'd like, I can set those up and we can talk about it.
Right. Go ahead, Darren.
Yeah, I guess, so I hear that everyone's goal is mixed use and that that's going to be a priority, but how do we ensure that if we sell the land and we turn over all of the management of the RFPs and the development process over to the University of Utah, is there a way within the development agreement? I'm just not sure what that looks like to ensure that it really is mixed use, and not just like, you know, a cafe at the bottom of a large research building, like what you might see on a University of Utah campus, which is appropriate on a college campus, but I'm hopeful that this isn't just purely an extension of a college campus, that it's actually a vibrant urban center. And so that's, I mean, and maybe it's just not something that we're going to get out of this project, but I hope it is. And I'm wondering what the mechanism, and it seems like it would have to be a contract written into the contract of the sale or something like that. But what would that look like?
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
again, Kara, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that we had discussed a sort of governance board with this, that the city would still be a part of the conversation, whether it be the city, the RDA, but the last time we had a briefing, I remember this sort of structure, although it may not have been all the way fleshed out yet, the idea of having a kind of governance to this, wherein we would have a voice still in this and make this really the partnership. Am I wrong? Did I make that up?
No, you're completely right. But the missing portion was there's a governance board. How many people is this governance board? Because we can have
I
one.
recognize that it wasn't all the way fleshed out yet, but the point was that we were working on an actual partnership wherein we would maintain the sort of a voice on this, where and my understanding is, again, it wasn't totally worked out, but I think to Darren's point, that is how we ensure. I think that it seemed to me from the last briefing that the U was really working with the RDA and saying, what does this board look like, making sure that the either the RDA board or the city council or administration, the city, whoever that position may be, or maybe one from each, I don't know, was there and had a voice.
Right. Yeah,
And
I think that's right on the spot. That's what's happening, and I think now if if that's going to happen, then we need to make sure, at least in my opinion, we need to make sure that our voice, what if we're going to participate, it's in perpetuity, and it's also a strong voice, because if we have 25 people making a decision and we're just one voice out of these 25 people, we won't have much say. We won't be able to persuade the majority to to fulfill our hopes and dreams of when we sold this land or when we dispose of it. And so I think that's something to look closely how this governance board will work.
Madam Chair, if I could just jump in and try to give a real high level answer that I think will address everyone's concerns. My quick answer there is that there's probably 4 or 5 different layers of ways that we ensure that happens. Number one, first and foremost, is that is entirely what the university's plan is and direction for doing this innovation district. And they would be the first to tell you, along with Clark, is that that's what makes a successful innovation district, is the concept of a mixed use. And so, not going into the details of that, I will add on to that we as an RDA then will further ensure that happens, not just as a function of what our design guidelines are for the property right now, but also within our development agreements and participation agreements that we'll put in place with the university as part of the sale. And then to Board Member Fowler's comment, yes, we anticipate that either the agency or the city will hopefully have an ongoing role on the governance structure, but at that point, that's primarily just governance and district at that point. So the controls don't necessarily happen on the back end as much as when we dispose of this property and negotiate with the U for that initial development of what those buildings and uses are. That's where we will ensure that this is a major part of the innovation district and how it's built out and how it functions and how it's set up to do that in perpetuity.
Great. All right, if nobody else has any more comments, I think we're ready to move on. We're about 15 minutes behind. So thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, Jen, for being here, and staff for presenting. We are moving on to item number 4, which is a resolution for fiscal year 2021-22, affordable housing development funding priorities follow-up. And at the table, we have Allison Rowland from our City Council office, Danny Walls, and Tammy Hunsaker. So go ahead, Allison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as a reminder for the board, this is a continuation of the discussions over the past few months that have been going on to define the housing development funding priorities for fiscal year 2022. So these discussions and the resolution that comes out of this is intended as policy direction for RDA staff as they consider applications for an FY22 NOFA, which they hope to have out in a few months. In future years, the annual priorities discussion will be scheduled during March or April, so it will happen before budget discussions begin, but that wasn't possible this year. So today, the RDA staff has further discussed with the chair and vice chair their interests for the FY22 affordable housing priority strategy. And the goal here is to discuss this. So I will leave that discussion for Tammy and Danny, and happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Madam Chair and Allison. Taylor, is it possible for me to share my screen?
Yeah, absolutely. I will give that to you.
Thank you. All right, can everyone see that? Hopefully, okay.
Yes.
Moving forward, as Allison provided an overview of this annual housing funding strategy and funding priorities really comes out of two policy resolutions that the board adopted earlier this year. That's why this process is being carried out a little bit later than we anticipate in the future. But the idea with the funding strategies is rather than having static funding priorities that live within the root policy resolutions that would last over years or even decades, the board will have flexibility to tailor funding priorities on an annual basis to take advantage of current opportunities, other resources, and address current community needs, and also allow the funding strategies to evolve as the city's housing plan is updated and other policy priorities are put in place. So the board adopted the annual budget earlier this year, as you know, which has the housing allocations in it. So the process we're at right now is these annual funding priorities, and then staff will take the funding priorities and administer the housing funds through a competitive no-fail process. So the housing funding priorities are applied in two ways. We've talked about this before. They will be used to rank and prioritize applications that we receive through the NOFA, and also to provide interest rate reductions to the base interest rate of loans for those projects that are selected for funding. So the priorities for allocating funds, what we have heard as RDA staff from board members in previous discussions is that board members are interested in elevating certain priorities higher than other priorities that were proposed. These higher priorities include family housing, sustainability, home ownership, and target populations. And there might be a few others that the board members would like to elevate. Also, there has been interest in making the sustainability priority a threshold requirement. And in your memo and transmittal, we have proposed this threshold requirement, and it's to meet enhanced energy performance, and it would apply to all projects receiving $400,000 or more in funding, and it would require that the energy use intensity of the project is 25% lower than the median energy use intensity of similar buildings, or the building can achieve a designed to earn Energy Star. And that is the Energy Star score that may be obtained before a building is put into operation. And then we would also require for ongoing tracking and monitoring of these requirements that the projects participate in the city's sustainability department's Elevate Buildings program. And then looking at priorities for interest rate reductions, a few notes on how these are applied. There is a base interest rate to each loan that is around 3%. So each funding priority that a project qualifies for would receive a 0.5% interest rate reduction. And the kind of floor on this would be it could only go down to 1%. So the ceiling is 3% and the floor is 1%. And for each 0.5% interest rate reduction the project qualifies for on a 30-year term, that would provide about $77,000 in savings or $6,400 annually. So these interest rate reductions, we look at them as not only incentivizing the development of affordable housing, but also incentivizing other public benefits, such as ground floor commercial or publicly visible art, among others. So we have reworked the funding priorities that we proposed originally earlier this year based on what we've heard from the board. So this is a possible scenario. This is in your transmittal packet. We have created sustainability as a threshold requirement with the language that we reviewed on the previous slide. We also elevated fund leveraging to a threshold requirement. So the maximum amount of RDA contribution to the capital stack would be 10%. So those would be required to receive funding. And then we have weighted, this column is the NOFA rank weight. So the higher the number, the more importance we would put on that funding priority. So we have weighted family housing, target populations, which are those special populations and at-risk populations, neighborhood safety, which is revitalizing and redeveloping severely distressed properties, home ownership and transportation opportunities. We've weighted those higher at a 3. We have weighted missing middle and unique housing types, expand opportunities, so affordable housing in those high opportunity areas, neighborhood impact, which is essentially the project would be submitted to an RDA, a heightened RDA design review, and commercial vitality, which is that ground floor commercial. We've ranked those at a 2, so a medium priority, and then historic preservation and adaptive reuse and public art as a 1, as a lower priority. But all of these funding priorities would be evaluated through the application process based on those weight factors. And then the other column over here is which interest rate reductions would qualify, or which funding priorities would qualify for an interest rate reduction. And we have all of them qualifying. The sustainability would be if the project qualifies for heightened sustainability standards above the threshold requirement. And we have taken out the fund leveraging as an interest rate reduction, but all of the other ones would receive 0.5% if the project qualifies. And before I open it up for board discussion, just one other note on the sustainability component. RDA staff is working on a blanket sustainability policy for the RDA based on direction from the mayor. And this policy we anticipate will be coming to you for consideration soon. So this sustainability threshold requirement that we reviewed on the previous slide would be in the interim before that larger sustainability policy is approved by the board. So I can open it up to discussion or answer any questions. The board obviously can rearrange these priorities, add priorities, or modify the priorities as they see fit. So I will turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Tammy. So I think it would be important to remind the board that this proposal right now we see, like, it's flexible, as Tammy mentioned, but it's also for just this fiscal year 21-22. And we will have to review this again in March to see, you know, what we need to switch here to be more effective in our priorities to make an impact in the community. So this is, in a way, you know, a few months so that we can get this NOFA going, and then we'll review it again in a few months from now. So board members, yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, Tammy, I appreciate that presentation. I think as laid out, the priorities all seem good. I appreciate some of the thresholds and the prioritization of them. I think we could get into the details of whether we want one versus the other to be a 2 or a 3 or a 1. But what would help me with that conversation, and I'm not proposing necessarily that anything change for this year, but what would help me in that conversation in future years is if we could have some type of reporting prior to our discussion on that of in the past year, this is how many how many units or how many dollars or how many projects hit goals 1, 2, 3, 1 through 13, and which goals were missing, so that we could retool that and say, okay, well, maybe this year we need to really focus on historic preservation and adaptive reuse because none of our funding went to that last year. And so maybe next year we adjust that to a 3 instead of a 1. So that type of reporting mechanism I think would be really helpful. And I don't know if that goes by how many dollars went into a certain project or how many units included a certain project or how many projects total were there, but and maybe it's a matrix of all of that information, but I think that would be really helpful for me to know if some things should be prioritized differently in the next funding year. So that's what I would hope we could see. I don't see anything right now that I want to advocate for having changed. And then a separate comment, I appreciate, Tammy, that you talked about the mayor's proposed ordinance, and I was reading in the mayor's 2021 plan about a proposed city council to the city council an ordinance that requires all new buildings to be funded by city money to be emission free. And so I support that idea, and I hope that that will be included in that larger ordinance that we get. And I think it could actually also potentially be included just in this interim as well. So in addition to these lower energy consumption, but we also are requiring the buildings to be emission free, which I think means that there's no gas fired utilities. It's all electric, which is cleaner for our air. So those would be my comments. I'm interested in that emission free thing, and I'd be interested in potentially including it in this if we felt comfortable doing so.
Madam Chair, may I respond really quick? Yes, Director Mono, thank you for your comments on the reporting, and that's exactly how we want to structure it moving forward. We didn't really have time this year to get into that, and I think once this is adopted, it will kind of create a baseline for funding priorities moving forward. So we will definitely come back with a reporting on how the funding priorities were applied and how they were met, and how the funding essentially was executed in the community in terms of number of projects, units, AMIs, everything of that sort. And then in regard to the sustainability policy, you're exactly right with the zero emission buildings by 2023. The policy that we're working on moving forward proposes an interim step between now and 2023 to kind of ease the development community into that heightened standard. So expect that within the next couple of months.
Excellent, thank you.
Tammy. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Go
Madam
ahead.
Chair.
Yeah, Dugan, go ahead.
Thank you, Tammy, and thank you, Danny, for putting this together. I really appreciate the thought that went into this ranking, and I want to kind of echo what Board Member Mono said. I agree with that, and I think this is a great starting point. As Chair Valamola said, we're going to be reviewing this again in a matter of days, come March. And so I think this is a great starting point. We look at this and we can adjust from there. But I think your top priorities are solid. I just spoke with the school board. I think it was yesterday. I spoke with the school board, and family housing was one of their big concerns at the school level. And I think we got to keep that on and that probably also dovetails right into the target population. So I think we're on the right track here. If we have to tweak things, come March, we can do that. But then at that point, we'll have some data to back our tweaking up with what we're going to get provided over the next few months. So I'm very in favor of moving forward with this and then adjusting as we see fit come the March timeframe. So I appreciate all the effort and the thought that went into this, and also thank you, Allison, for helping out in that. Appreciate it very much.
Anybody else? Let me see. I don't see any other hands up. If I don't see you, you want to speak, just speak. All right. So my guess is that we are mostly in favor of this. Danny and Tammy, is that what you wanted to hear so that you can move forward?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I forgot to tell you that there is a resolution provided in the packet. The resolution does not have funding priorities attached. So you would want to adopt the resolution with the funding priorities as presented, and we'll just attach those, or if there are any modifications, we can do that as well.
Okay, so we are calling for a motion, so go ahead.
And there is a motion sheet in your packet, if you recheck it.
All right.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
I move that the board adopt the resolution titled FY 2021-22 Affordable Housing Funding Priorities, with the final funding priorities be provided as presented to the resolution.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion by Board Member Dugan and a second by Board Member Ferris. I'm going to roll call this. Board Member Rogers?
Yes.
Ferris?
Yes.
Wharton?
Yes.
Mano?
Yes.
Dugan?
Yes.
Fowler?
She had to jump off for another quick meeting.
So Board Member Fowler is absent and I am a yes. So it does pass. Thank you very much, RDA staff and our staff for this. This is awesome. I'm excited to see what comes out of this. And we will have to bump one of our items, which is item number 5, to our next meeting. And we're going into item number 6, report announcements from the executive director. Madam May, here she might not be.
Nothing from me.
All right, thank you. We're moving on to item number 7, report and announcements from the RDA staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick few updates here. Number 1, Director Dugan, I appreciate you lumping me into Tammy's efforts on those housing priorities and thinking that I had really anything to do with that. I'd like to thank Tammy for all of her work on that, because she's really done a great job of pulling that together. So I would feel guilty if I took any praise from you for that. So I wanted to make sure it was clear that that was entirely Tammy and obviously rest of staff as it relates to sustainability efforts and everything, but thank you for that. So other updates, just wanted to give real fast. The agency has closed on the property from the Tongan Church at 877 West and 400 South. Thank you to the mayor and the board for allocating those funds. We have closed on that. Our next steps will be to perform some minor environmental remediation on the site. And also we will start to work with what is an existing commissary kitchen that is still operating out of the building, taking them on as a tenant. And then our staff will actually also start looking at exploring mixed use development scenarios that could potentially include them as an ongoing basis. So we just closed on it and we're starting to then focus our attention on the next steps, but wanted to let you know that that is now an official agency property. So thank you again for that. Construction has also started on the 600 South Main track station, which UTA has sent out a small press release on that was covered by a couple of news outlets, but that has begun. And then we're also, if it hasn't been finalized already, we're looking to finalize the schedule for beginning construction on the 300 West streetscape improvements. These are the ones north of 300 North, not the mess that is on the south end of the city, but this is the beautification on the north side of 300 West. So we have been in contact with the Capitol Hill Neighborhood Council and West High School regarding the schedule and any impacts and mitigation we can for that corridor. And then finally, just an update, if you haven't been participating, letting everyone know that events at the Gallivan Center are in full swing. They are primarily booked for the remainder of the summer and fall. So some of the events that have already happened, there was a free family-friendly drag show. Try saying that 5 times fast, as well as the first Afro-Utah Festival recently. So, and then this past week saw the kickoff of the 5-part Twilight concert series. So if you have any questions on that, I would invite you to check out their new and updated website for their schedule. So That is all we have for updates. Appreciate it, unless there's any questions from the members of the board.
I don't see anybody's hand up. So thank you, Danny, and rest of the staff for all the work that you do. We're moving on to, we have item D, which is a written briefing. So please take a look at that. It's informational about the RDA commercial loan portfolio. If you have additional questions, you may ask staff. Item E, it's consent. We don't have any, but we do have a closed session. So I need a motion for a closed session for strategy sessions to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property and advice of counsel. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I'm sure I'm going to let Board Member Wharton do it since he's really good at that. But I just wanted to point out that in our email, we received some comments from George Chapman. He was unable to log on. I just wanted it on the record that we all received that email. He's got several comments on that. So
thank you. Noted. Let's add those comments to the record, please.
Thank you, Councilmember Rogers. Madam Chair, I move that we go into a closed session for the purpose of discussing acquisition of property and advice of counsel.
Second.
I have a motion by Board Member Wharton and a second by Board Member Perez. When I roll call this, Rogers?
yes.
Perez?
Yes.
Wharton?
Yes.
Mano?
Yes.
Dugan?
Yes.
Fowler? If she is not back. Fowler is absent, and I'm a yes. So we're moving into the closed session. Let me see if we have a different link.
There is a separate link for the closed session, so
Perfect. Please check
yeah,
your
look out
emails.
for that.
The link is right there. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much.